I was exploring what is the way of me working on this game that is going to work, that it's going to be fun long term. Because did want to finish it and have playable demos as soon as possible. I think this is the last time that it was at a significant demo phase. So I'm going to do a quick look through the years of Double Demons, at least from what I have screenshots of, which seems to start in 2020, August of 2020. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to upload this, but assuming I do, this may or may not be very boring, but I've been thinking lately that I know that I've done a lot of cool things, and although it's, much of a lore dump on other people to get them up to speed, I would appreciate a lore dump for myself sometimes. So here we go. All right. So, 2020, August, and this is several years into the project already, but I think I had decided that I wanted to try to make a mobile version of Electra, Electra being the dialogue writing tool that I made after coming up with the Electra theory of branching or depth branching, which is basically instead of just having choice one and choice two and AI response, response to one, response to two, maybe you could fix a lot of problems and, have play styles by having dialogue choice, 1A, 1B, and 2A, 2B. And the difference being that the A or B are micro expressions or like a nuanced way of saying the same exact thing. And because you're saying the same exact thing, it can be linked to the same set of dialogue options. So instead of, you having reaction 1-to-1 and reaction to the second option, you could have two reactions for 1A and 1B that could go, mix and match, and two reactions for 2A and 2B, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, I decided that it was hard enough to think about that I wanted to make a dialogue tool, and I made many versions at this point, but both combinations of lots of different factors. I wanted to make a mobile app version, so this was like a logging in screen to connect to an account system that would automatically save writing files as you went. Let's see here. At this time, I was also exploring working on like some sort of like location-based VR game that would be very much kind of like an interactive fiction, but with hired actors, kind of like motion capture to sort of fill in the gaps, kind of like D&D style, but with a lot of my own choices on stuff, which I was really excited about. And I did a lot of tests where I had like bought a sword, and I think it's like one of my only like YouTube shorts is like me attaching like a Vive tracker to the sword. Do I have a screenshot of that? I'll just get it from YouTube. Let's see. But yeah, basically, here it is.
Yo, what's up,
Basically, I
guys?
looked
Looking
into,
to revive an
do I
old
want
build
to
that I did, old. It's like a
do
couple of years
something
ago
more like that.
when I used it in
Super
the
into,
W3 Champions Finals
like
against Hawk and Blade.
location
The
VR
Farseer
experience that was even like Ghostbusters theme, because it's just super fun to see your friends in VR. And we had just bought a house that had a huge basement, so it kind of had a cool area to test in, as far as like testing a like kind of 20 foot by 20 foot space, for something like that. So it was super fun. Turns out that what's it called, hardware of making Vive trackers and a external rumble that's a lot stronger was pretty tricky, but I ended up getting something working, and spend some time basically developing like, okay, what would be the ideal game that everyone could participate in. You could have the people going into like kind of the VR space as like heroes, you could have what I was thinking of was like the parent class, like, or just like people hanging out at the bars more casually, that could kind of do like a Hunger Games style like sponsorship, or like, small mini events could be triggered through some sort of phone app, or you could have events where people in the bar area or whatever in the lobby could grab just like a standard console controller as like the different enemies sometimes. And then you had like staff, so like person running the show as the DM, and then people helping either like as narrators or different voice actors. And then basically you would kind of reality TV style show what was happening in the game, in the arena, out on like, big TVs in the bar area, like, or restaurant type stuff. So that was super fun to work on. And yeah, let's see. So I was doing that. I think at some point, let's see, 2020, moving on to, let's see, what is this? October. Oh no, this is all the way in December. I was, kind of leaning back towards working on the mobile app for Electra, which is, more Double Demons related and less to do with Quest Worlds. And basically, once again, trying to tackle a very long-term problem of, well, how do I organize the kind of chaotically branching content of Electra, just like in a way that makes it fun to work on. At that time, I felt like I had a working way to process it with all the different reaction formulas and stuff, but actually writing within it had been kind of painful just at the starting, stopping. Like I wanted it to be as easy to start and stop as possible. And I think it was really in 2021 in January where I started slowing to a stop, like, how much abstraction am I adding that's like actually useful? It was a fun thing to work on, but it kind of soured in a lot of ways when I realized, like, I'm sure I'm doing a ton of work in the hopes of avoiding more work or making it more optimized. It's always really satisfying thing to do, to find a faster way to do stuff, just like hotkeys or different shortcuts in, whether it be on the art or on the code side, but just kind of lost some energy for it. And I think at that time, talking to a lot of people, talking to Savannah, talking to different friends and family, I kind of realized that, what, I think maybe it's time to stop doing like, across the board, revamps of art to like whatever level that was, what I wanted for the end game, and just try to cruise through and see what shortcuts I could actually add. So I, went into using a lot of Cinti assets as characters and tried to, block out some things that I had done in previous versions of the game, but that, had been kind of like lost to, reworks of how I was setting things up. And I think that was really positive. I was able to get a lot of things done really quickly. Let's see, and this is, when is this? This is in like February. I'm starting to actually bid out the game again, but just with stock low poly characters, which was super fun. Starting to, think bigger about, okay, what does the day loop look like in the world? You start off as like kind of a high schooler by day, and then you fight monsters in the spirit realm at night. What if I just kind of place, almost like PowerPoint style, all these stock assets in the place, like, can I get a feel for the pacing and an idea on how I can really enjoy just working on the game directly, more so. And it was super fun. I think by the end of, let's see, maybe March or April, I was kind of deep back in like kind of mechanics land, where I was like, okay, there could be some phone-based mechanics for, even almost like a social media system or something. Figuring out how to do, basically selecting objects. One of the hardest things I ran into kind of throughout working on the game was, well, how do you show players dialogue options and also let them do other things like, combat, or even just like romance mechanics like holding hands. In order for, in my mind, and I think I still believe that actually, in order for that to be like fun and also either natural enough or just like make sense, it felt like it had to happen in the same place. I talk about the park bench a lot as like an issue where you just have the game on total pause mode and while you're reading and choosing dialogue options. And I just really hated the pace of that. Now, it makes sense mechanically, for games to do that and for players to interact with it that way, if they're not just like auto skipping through it, because a lot of times those dialogue options matter quite a lot. But regardless, I went really fast. I think, let's see, what is this? By May and June, I had come up with a way to kind of visualize and sort of like a 3D compass sort of thing. Okay, here's the player and here's the different poses that I wanted you to take, even for simple stuff like sitting down, but especially for like, more complicated stuff like reaching to hold a hand. Looks like this is when I did Mothfrog, which was a really fun game jam with a lot of friends, where you were like a combination of like an experiment of a moth combined with a frog. And basically the moth would allow you to fly, but only because it was being attracted to lights. If you got too close to the lights, you'd be electrocuted. And the frog could stick out its tongue to try and swing either out of the light or across dangerous stuff. That was super fun game jam to do, even though we were super constrained on time and had a kid at the time already. But so that was super fun. And kind of also gave me a lot of perspective as I was working on magic system stuff in Double Demons. I was experimenting with different kinds of like, should I use root motion to get some of the animations looking better? What different like physics add-ons from the Unity Asset Store could I use? There's just so much out there, and a lot of it's really cheap, and I hadn't thought about it too much because like, character movement, that's easy. I don't need help for that. This is a friend's trebuchet asset. I was trying to think of a way to do pets modeled off of like medieval armaments. So that was a really fun thing that I was playing around with as well. Let's see. During that time, I had an idea to do like a surfing castle tower that you could run around on. Let's see. Building out a testing map for fighting waves of monsters as it kind of moves through the territory that you're defending in the spirit realm. Let's see. And let's see, what time is this? This is like August of 2021. So at this point, let's see, I'm moving back into, I have this whole dialogue system. Let's build out the game story, using all these things. I had a big breakthrough where I basically realized, this is August 2021. Even though I have all these complicated like depth branching stuff, to get over the kind of like writer's block initial phase, just having it in like a screenplay format where it's like one character player, another, AI character player back and forth was super easy. And I think this is when I like had a huge kind of surge of writing. It wasn't the best writing in the world, but I felt like I was really exploring the outlines that I had thought about over the years in a big way, like, homecoming will be a big deal, and different friends, allies, or enemies can, either tease or pressure you into asking someone to homecoming, or, you can try to resist it. Like all those different types of conversations were really fun to write and think about. And it was very rewarding, but in some ways, because I was able to, write so much so quickly, that gave me a lot more time to reflect and feel like I really wanted the story to, one, be better. I wanted to make different versions, but I also really wanted it to not be painful. Even though the dialogue tools that I had made up until that point always worked, a lot of times the rework aspect, like changing out sections or going back to edit ones, would have weird glitches of things not getting saved, or it just being really hard to tell if it was working like properly as I changed things. So that definitely soured some things, but I think for the most part, I was largely staying focused on, iteration is king. At this point, 2021, worked on the game for like a total of basically 7 years now. So that's like kind of like like a halfway point. So I kind of know through iteration that a lot of the stuff that I work on, whether it's code or art, had been reworked or thrown out or, just changed direction in a lot of ways, where it felt less personal, like the waste aspect, like efficiency, like, oh, is this going to be finally in the game? And more like I was exploring, okay, what is the way of me working on this game that is going to work, that it's going to be fun long term? Because I, did want to finish it and have playable demos as soon as possible. I think this is the last time that it was at a significant demo phase where you could start up, then there was some intro story elements. You wake up in your bed and trying to figure out what was going on. You were living a new life and be introduced to the spirit world and fight monsters in one wave with a boss spawn at the end of the day. So I was proud of that, but at the same time, it had gotten to the point where I wasn't enjoying working on it, and I think it was just more important to me that I was enjoying working on it, and what that came down to was that the friction, like the edits to things, like wasn't a painful process, and it was hard for me to know. Oh yeah, I did like an inventory system that was super fun. I was like really obsessed with the idea that, like what would be a cool use for VR would be to have an inventory that both hands could interact with, like a two-sided inventory, so you could drag from one pocket to the other, or instead of having there be space like Resident Evil style in an inventory before you move something, you could be moving like an object that has like a weird shape, like a gun or a rocket launcher, and then use your other hand to move like pieces out of the way. I was just like, oh, that's super fun. A little bit distracted because even though I was excited about some of my ideas, inventory, like Tetris management, is not actually that fun for me. So I ultimately had a hard time believing that it was worth it, even though I felt like it was a creative use of VR tools. So I think at this point, let's see, this is 2021 November, I was back on the kind of writing with an electric grind. I would have it set up in dialogue format. I ran into some weird bugs where I couldn't have conversations that were longer than 73 chunks for some reason, but 73 chunks is quite a lot. And chunks are just like a set of options, both for the player or the AI. So like in like full like writing format, that could have been like 300 to 400, separate things that could have been said in a conversation. But it still definitely bugged me a lot and kind of added to some of that anxiety. I think, okay, at this point, there was another game jam. There was actually the same game jam, I believe, like GMTK a year later. This game jam went a little bit rougher. It was just a tough time with the timing of, what's it called? Job work was tough and at the time, and I think kids needed more attention. So, we did our best with this one, but it didn't go as smoothly as Mothfrog do, and that kind of did, and that kind of drew my attention to, again, wanting to enjoy the process most of all, which has its own complicated, set of things. But I started doing some vlogs, which was really fun because I was just really excited to talk about all the ideas. I mean, as you can tell, I'm still very excited to talk about all the ideas and stuff. I have a lot of fun sharing the ideas of the game, even though I've done it, hundreds, if not thousands of times, many different parts of the ideas. But I wanted to do a challenge where I just talked about the game, just like almost to hear my own voice on it, because a lot of the people I was around, I had already said the ideas, and even though they had changed and improved over time, it was just kind of an exhausting subject. So I just wanted to kind of put out what was on my mind and what I was trying to tackle in the longer format, and that was super fun. Let's see, and then 2022 hit, and I had a realization that even though my dialogue tool was working really well, prime dimension, second dimension, even though it was working really well, the thing that was the most helpful was a kind of like last minute hack to see the same conversation like side by side, so that I could figure out like the different ways that it could go. Like, one, if the relationship was in different place, I think I have the bond on 0 or the bond on 10. Respect is in the middle on that one, and respect is high on the other one, or slightly higher. And just seeing how that changes the reaction calculations and stuff. And it was then I was like, oh wow, parallel dimension writing, which is just saying, seeing two possible outcomes side by side is like really powerful for designing, what should branch, what shouldn't branch, and kind of just enjoying the process in general. I continue to feel way less stress while writing when I can write 2 versions of the same option instead of just one. One, because even if it's just the micro style branching where it doesn't make like the traditional branching happen, you could think of it as flavor text plus. Even if that's the case, by writing 2 options, that makes me feel less self-conscious about how bad either one of them is. But it also means that when I do want to branch it, the structure's already there. Like, it already exists in a double format. So that was really fun. And I revisited a lot of those ideas at this time. Like, I did make it work, but sometimes having it all set up would make, if I wanted to change anything or add any new features, like pretty tough, because it really wasn't designed to do this, where I just kind of had some duplicate scripts and references and trying to find ways so that they could write to the same like conversation without causing errors. That worked for the most part, but it would be kind of laggy and glitchy. I was still really proud of it because it felt like a totally new way of interacting with the systems and the ideas that I had. So I really loved working with it, but it was very much like sometimes like a strain where I was like, I really wish that it had always worked like this, because this is really fun. And I wrote a lot of stuff under that system. Let's see what happened next. Looks like it was around this time that I started to feel like, I really want the game to look like what I was imagining. The game to look like, it's a good shareable photo. So I started trying to take character design more seriously. Where did the character first show up? This is pretty far along the process, but it looks like I just kind of, okay, the screenshots are backwards. Yeah, I worked on a new version of Poppy, which was like kind of the first time I had done more significant 3D art in a really long time. I got a lot of help kind of learning new pipelines for how to approach things. It was super fun. And it gave me a real feeling of, I can really make this game whatever I want to be. It was very fun. I think I also explored doing like a social media system during this time, because some of the stats were kind of overwhelming for even me to interact with as a developer, but also I thought it might be fun for players to be able to have a stronger sense of what was going on long term, even though there was plenty of HUD elements in the moment. Did some very light concept work for some of the other characters, tried to figure out what combination of ZBrush, Blender, and how I wanted to animate things. I think I switched to Autorig Pro sometime around now, which was a huge boost to be able to rework things. Looks like I went straight into making Eve, which was also really fun to work on. She kind of breaks out of a sci-fi laboratory, so she has the fun sort of skin-tight flight suit that I've been concepting, and also kind of helped me realize, how much other tools like Marvelous Designer did I want to use for the jacket. I think I did use Marvelous Designer for the jacket. And though that was fun, it added a lot of friction and kind of slow down to the pipeline. Kind of, on one hand, you think it'd be net helpful because you get that non-destructive, like you can play around with the clothing. But I ended up having a way more clear vision for like how I wanted to design the clothing in different folds and stuff. So that non-destructiveness just kind of made me feel like I probably didn't have it as good as it could be. So I don't think I did too much Marvelous Designer after that point. But at this point, I was kind of exploring, okay, for actions, like just even like making eye contact with someone to talk, or for kissing, maybe one way to solve some of the statue effect of VR would be to give players more clear indicators on like what actions they were considering, like even for like hand holding or like punching or different character, like having zones that would show you, okay, if your hand gets this close, then the AI character is aware, both of if you're trying to punch them or if you're trying to hold their hand, stuff like that. And that all felt like it made a lot of sense. And from the test that I did, I felt like that was the right direction to go. A bit of a chaotic shift, because it was basically me realizing, well, how do I combine, something as complicated as like a targeting computer version of blah, 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 what was I saying? Of like kissing or whatever with like talking at the same time. Like that would be really cool, because I think there is a lot of, saying words between, both romantic or combat actions that can feel very natural and very fun. Let's see, and this is all the way in 2022. So this would have been 06, so May, June. Yeah, so this would have been June, well, almost like a year and a half ago. Then what next? Me looking at some old Blender game engine stuff. Nostalgia, I'm sure. Me taking another crack at the reaction animation is what that looks like. I think I really matured a lot of ideas on fixing if I don't write enough dialogue options to match, the extreme positive or negative or medium reactions that they're having. Oh, well, that could be frustration or guilt. And I was really into figuring out like, okay, how do I visualize all this? Because this is really cool. This changes everything, basically. If I don't have to worry about, where the AI's relationship could be, but control for the opposite. Like no matter what it is, I just compensate with frustration or guilt. Like if there's only one AI written response, which is always like, I hate you and I want to date you. But like the math of their emotions is actually very attractive to the player. Either the writer's unaware of what the game has been up to that point, if there's like mods, or for me, like the player has gone some route that I didn't expect that allowed them to gain attraction before when I thought would be possible. What that could lead to is a huge like guilt reaction. So if they have an emotional math at 10 out of 10, but the only written response is 1 out of 10, that would be 9 points of guilt, because they're basically treating the player differently from how they actually feel, which is, I think, a very real experience. And part of what I love about the system is not everything should be corrected for. Sometimes you feel strongly about someone and don't tell them. Sometimes they feel strongly about you and they don't tell you for all sorts of reasons. And sometimes you can clear that miscommunication up. I think at this point I had started working on the third character, Nazar. And at some point during working on that, what happened? I was doing some concepting. It was not going well, but, I was trying to figure out how I wanted the kind of world of like either gods or kind of more powerful spirit world controlling, either army leaders or something to work. Let's see. Still working on Nazar, and then let's see, this would have been October 2022. I wanted to focus on, I guess, the romance mechanics some more. I had a fun green screen setup where I was trying to set up like green screen like objects that would like occlude me so that I could try to figure out, okay, what about romance mechanics in a very more nuanced, like lighthearted, like on the emotional side, like the tension of like, again, like reaching for someone's hand, not in like necessarily like a goofy movie way where you're like staring at their hand, but in something that's a little bit, at least in my experience, more realistic, where you're just sitting next to them, like on the bus or sitting next to them watching a movie, and you're checking to see, you know, if your finger brushes against theirs, are they like pulling their finger away, and are you immediately saying, oh, sorry, or are they leaving the contact there? Like stuff like that was way more interesting to me as an interaction. So I think I was trying to explore like, well, how do I actually do that? And I think a lot was happening at that time, to be fair, but focusing more on the progress rather than on the obstacles. That's an old GIF that I must have screenshotted to share to explain something to someone. Let's see, what else was I doing? I was trying to find a way to like basically simplify or minimize multiple things going on. I think it was around this time that I had like some ideas of Chrono Smash. I think probably even a little bit before this. I had that, which is basically, well, you can juggle a conversation or even potentially multiple conversations to stress the system, but really just a conversation and like an action, like picking up objects or punching someone, if I can have a minimized like version of each kind of like piece of progressing content, or mega as I came to refer to it. I got some mannequins because I was wanting to be more focused on, well, finding a good solution for VR. I think I had the mannequins for a while, but thinking of them as a real tool for VR to try to figure out how I wanted things to work. Looks like around this time, oh, this must have been after Winter was born. Yeah, in 2023, wow. Yeah, this would have been in January. There was not much time to work on stuff, but I think just from the break of, you know, having a new kid and there's just not very much time, I just spent a lot of time thinking about things. You know, again, I think my priority that I fall back onto is really wanting to enjoy working on the project. I think in a lot of cases that has led to me delaying or making like counter progress. Not sure, you know, but it felt important to me then, and each time that has been like a significant driver and change. So I think I was trying to come up with a custom UI so that I could select emotional options a lot faster through one slider instead of like two scroll bars that I was moving, if you'd seen in previous screenshots. Yeah, and that was really fun. I mean, anytime you consider a rework, even if you don't commit to it all the way. I think at this time I'd also became really interested in trying to explain what I was working on better, because I've been working on it for a really long time. And even though I'd explained some of the ideas over and over and over, I don't think I was actually doing a very good job of that in a lot of cases. And I knew a lot of people really wanted to understand more what I was talking about. So I made like a little like helper graphic as a Unity window that kind of explains what I think of as the types of choice that exist. This would be like pure flavor text where it seems like there's branching, but there isn't. This would be kind of your traditional branching where each choice has its own response, has the exponential problem where if you do that, then every choice kind of multiplies the game unless you recollapse it at the end. And then, you know, something like this is like a skillable or some sort of variable that you can influence. You know, you think of your persuasion level as making certain dialogue options appear, would be something. And then combining kind of like the traditional branching alongside influenceable traits leaves you with something a lot closer to how my system works. So that was helpful, and I think I did some more shorts on that and experimented with how I could be visualizing the different like branching choices to empower myself as a writer to get back into that, you know, writing more and having it be easier to edit, easier to think about and understand. In a lot of cases, I made tons of progress. Some things ended up being like kind of overdone on the UI end, but that's fine. I often feel like I want to push things farther than is ideal, because then I might end up figuring out, well, one, I could be wrong. Maybe I can push it as far as I want, whether it be a mechanic like, like kissing as something that would be helpful to get more information about in VR, like how close you actually are. Because, in reality, you can feel your body, you can't in VR. And so that basically means that you have no idea what's happening unless there's some sort of feedback otherwise, unless you do like a fade to black, which is, of course, a very valid option. And I was just trying to come up with ways to, represent that in the UI that I already had. What did I do next? Looks like I started bringing in some of the add-on packs and stuff, some things I'd used in the past for inverse kinematics to make the body work better. I've done a lot of fun tests with different shader materials, and can we do clothing transparency? What about those action arcs? Is there some way that I can make actions, even like punching, just like feel way better? Because I was just kind of becoming aware that actions in VR just didn't feel as satisfying as I wanted them to, even just outside the romance mechanics. Like just punching just felt very muddy and tough. And I came up with the idea that like, well, maybe that's because if we're doing something like punching, we're kind of lunging with one foot a lot of the time. Even with jabs, we're adding some leg movement usually, but in VR, that's kind of unnatural, because if you move too fast in your VR like environment, like play space, you might hit a wall. And it's also just very exhausting. So I realized, okay, well, what if I design the action system around being able to like lunge forward alongside the punching, or the kissing, or just like anything, like even picking up objects. And I realized that, wow, that feels amazing. And pretty much as soon as I had gotten like action arcs in a good place where it felt like, okay, doing actions with, that drive movement at the same time feels really good, because then you can line up way more precision on your actions. I mean, moving your hand is very precise. The only problem is it doesn't go very far. Like the fun space I think of like in VR is a very tight window, kind of like really just like a foot or two in front of you is like a place where you can see your hands really well and manipulate objects. But even like with analog style movement, you do not have very tight control on your relative like distance to objects, and especially like other characters that move a little bit. So having like the feet, the lunge movement with the hands was awesome. But almost about as soon as I got that, I finally kind of went through with buying like a motion capture suit. My idea with the arc actions and hand-based movement was basically, this works really well with the Electro system. I could just take all the different types of ways you could even pick up objects or kiss or punch or do spells, and use the emotional system because I've already got a whole HUD layout for that. That'll all work, and you can multitask it. If they use like basically the exact same types of UI, then jumping back and forth won't be jarring, or shouldn't be jarring at all, and should be masterable because of how much is shared. Let's see, it looks like I was doing some tests with facial capture. I think I had done some like auto generation of blend shapes to see like if that was even worth doing. I didn't really take the face capture aspect that seriously, but it was really fun. And I was surprised by how much I like wanted to try and include that in the future. I started adding a bunch of motion capture tools to see if there was a way for me to basically, start, stop, be able to clip the live kind of stream capture clips instead of manually editing any clips in like a 3D software like Blender. I wanted to do that. I wanted to skip that entirely. I was like, wow, how fast could I make cutscenes? Even if the animations were like partially scuffed, I could use a lot of different like add-on tool sets in Unity, to either fix the animations or, override stuff to generic animation bits. If I could just, detect the parts that were bad or come up with a way to make it so that the animation that streams in was like better quality. So I became super into that because it basically means, if I can live stream my motion capture straight into the game, save it, be able to play it back as it should exist in the game, then, I really kind of felt the the euphoria of like that's like an insanely, I don't know, like worthy goal for me. If I wanted to enjoy working on a very story heavy project, which I've always, wanted to do for basically all the projects I've ever worked on, have been very story oriented in many ways, both games and like kind of short films before doing games. One of the hardest things is, in order to know how a scene feels, yeah, I'll write it and I'll think it, or I'll say it in my head, play it back, voiceovers and stuff, line up music sometimes or sound effects. But like after it's animated and like lip synced and stuff, after all of that is kind of when it really hits me whether I really like what the scene is or not. Now, usually the sunk costs are really hard, so you really don't want to rework anything when you've gotten to that point. But the idea that I could come up with a way of doing things that was at least good enough where I could accept, even if I needed to accept it with like I will replace this one day, I could accept the animations that come in live, which is what this is. I was doing like a retargeting system that I'd come up with to make the animations match, no matter what the character was, really well. Then damn, like I can make as much game as I want once I get all the characters set up, because it only takes me a few minutes to, record like multiple animations, or, if I've got everything ready to roll automatically where I've written out a whole like 100 segment conversation and I can jump back and forth between characters all in one take. Kind of like, that Pixar short with the guy playing chess with himself. If I can just do that, even if the animations are like somewhat scuffed and need to be replaced, I can prototype out, VizDev style, the entire scene or multiple scenes in a row and watch it back and kind of be like, okay, I kind of like this, or no, I don't. And that costs so little that I absolutely would change the writing or something like that, or the voice acting, the delivery, the performance, or, chop out certain bits. Like that was, absolutely irresistible. So I pretty much just worked on motion capture tool sets and stuff. Let's see, at this point it's already, what is this, October of 2023, so that's only 2 months ago. I'd wanted to push for a demo, but I ended up really prioritizing the motion capture stuff, and at this point let's see, this is November, this is last month. I kind of started bringing in all the assets and add-ons. I was like, okay, I kind of want some sort of like a temple environment, throwing a bunch of stock assets that I kind of have mostly from bundles where there's like 30 assets, usually at least 2 or 3 of which I actually wanted, and we're still cheaper than the base price for the assets alone. Bringing them in and bringing all the kind of 2.5 characters that I had, Eve and Poppy, are kind of done, at least at the level that I was making them at that time, and Nazar's like half done. And trying to block out some animations, and one of the add-ons had like kind of like generic mannequin player model that felt more natural to use than a lot of the other like stand-in robot stuff I had been doing. So that was super fun, and I did a lot of tests with, what's the fastest way to do this? Can I, do it in VR? Technically, yes, and I set up some tools for that, but it ended up slowing down the program so much, maybe with better computer specs, I would have been fine, but I ended up just going for, what, I don't actually need the heads-up display to do all the different performances. It's nice to look around the environment, but I can get a lot with that with a projector, which I now have, and just some different acting elements, like just thinking of mannequins as the characters I'm acting against. And so I've done a lot of animations since then. What else? And so now I'm here. I think the latest thing that I worked on over the past like day or two was basically, what was it? Oh yeah, just having like voice lines, like I can record myself doing a voiceover of a scene that I've written out, and then just have it play back as I record the animations for the characters. So yeah, I'm very much enjoying that process. I feel like I still like, I say all this and I feel like, wow, like what did I do? Like what did I do this whole time? But I mean, I see these screenshots and I know that there's like 100 things that went into each thing. Like, you know, even like digging back through the screenshots I've already gone through. Like, you know, at one point I was like, you know, there's too much crap on screen, but I don't want to create this huge like uncanny valley is the wrong point, but the wrong metaphor. But basically, I didn't want this whole drop off between like screenplay mode where I'm just writing a standard script and then like what I've always chased after, which is the kind of nuanced expression depth. Like I want to give players play style. It's not just right dialogue option, wrong dialogue option. It's here's something in many ways it can be said, and here's something else in many ways it can be said, and the, you know, the damage and relationship impacts, you know, apply automatically. And you know, it still always comes to whatever I've written that is possible, but the player can find their own route to that because of this. So even though the screenplay format worked really well, which makes sense because it's just like normal writing at that point, it created this huge like kind of mental blockage where it's like, okay, time to take something that was a screenplay and turn it into what it's actually, you know, meant for, which is multiple different expression types. So to the more recent version, actually, this is not even, it looks a lot better than this right now. I haven't taken a screenshot of it in a while though. But yeah, the, what's it called? The kind of dual ultra, which is kind of a reference back to the parallel writing dimensions, which is like you really want to see 2 dialogue options, you know, per chunk or per, you know, segment of a conversation or action all the time, because one, it takes some of the pressure off of writing. I actually feel like I'm able to write a little bit faster doing 2 options. Because it just feels less pressure, you know. On one hand, it kind of dilutes, you know, maybe how much attention I bring to it, but that's the point, is I want a design where I'm able to kind of rush through on a first pass and not think of it as, okay, here's a single option that would make sense here, but this is a option that should have multiple options, and at least 2, you know, at least 2 player choices and at least 2 AI reactions. And even if the entire game was all flavor text, which it would never be, but even if it was, you would still have those relationship differences, which would massively color the way that the AI is treating you in different areas. So even if all your conversations were purely linear with only like 2 options that have like flavor text impact on what they say back, all the ways they would treat you action-wise, like whether for like the romance mechanics like pass fail or something like that, would be influenced by which emotions you use. So that's just kind of like a don't have to worry about this because I'm kind of forcing myself to, you know, live in a adjusted screenplay format. So I'm really happy with that. I do feel better. I think I was hoping to like amp myself up with like, oh, I did so many things, and like, you know, there are so many things going on. I don't think I dived into the depth of like what most of these like objects floating mean, you know, me trying to add my own filters to the motion capture, whether it be keeping the feet above ground or cleaning it up so I could crop the usable sections out of it, me searching through tons and tons of different shaders to figure out how to make the characters look better than they did, find a more unique style, and, you know, also something that could work for me long term. That was what I wanted, but you know, maybe either makes there less intense use of textures or for performance reasons, or just, I don't know, it was more fun or exciting to continue working on as I develop. I hungrily await getting this Coil Pro box thing. Who knows how it'll actually go, but the hope is that it will basically allow me to do my live stream style motion capture, but it have like perfect positions for the hands. So that'll make the animations better. But what it should allow me to do is be able to block out a cutscene, you know, just like with the, you know, guy playing himself in chess Pixar short. If I have absolute position on the hands, it should mean that I'm able to jump back and forth between different characters, like in a continuous like sequence, way more naturally. You know, I can act to where I was just standing instead of thinking of each animation as something generic that's going to need a lot of IK retargeting and stuff in order to make it work whatsoever. It has huge shockwaves on the type of pipeline that I was already committed to. So I'm excited about that. Anyways,